In this video, we're going to talk about separable and inseparable phrasal verbs, and those that are transitive and intransitive. A transitive verb takes an object. Most transitive phrasal verbs are separable. I can call off something, and I can call something off. I can pick out something, or I can pick something out. I can take off something, or I can take something off. With separable transitive phrasal verbs, the noun object, again, can go after the particle or between the verb and the particle. The verb to take off means to remove. I can say, I just took off my coat. I removed my coat. Or I can say, I took my coat off. However, when the object is a pronoun, such as it, the pronoun must go between the verb and the particle. I must say, I took it off. I cannot say, I took off it. Again, when the object of the phrasal verb is a pronoun, that pronoun must go between the verb and the particle. In English, when the object of a phrasal verb is a noun and it's a long phrase, we do not separate the verb and the particle. So the phrasal verb to fill out the form from the do not call registry. This is a long noun phrase that is the object of this verb to fill out. In this case, I do not want to separate the phrasal verb. I want to keep the particle, the verb and the particle together and say, I filled out the form from the do not call registry. If I say, I filled the form from the do not call registry out, it is hard to understand that. There are some verbs that are transitive where the verb and the particle must be separated. For example, to ask over. We must ask someone over. It means to invite to one's home. Or to see through. We must see something through. That means to complete it. So I have to say, ask Ian over, not ask over Ian. Or I saw the job through. I completed the job, not I saw through the job. Some phrasal verbs are inseparable, and they are transitive, which means they take an object. With inseparable transitive phrasal verbs, the noun and the pronoun always go after the particle. The phrasal verb to run into, it means to meet someone unexpectedly. I ran into Ed at work. Or with the pronoun him, I ran into him at work. I cannot say I ran Ed into at work or I ran him into. Some phrasal verbs can have a gerund. A gerund is a word that looks like a verb with ing form, but it functions as a noun. So they kept on calling, or Mike put off reporting. Those are gerunds, and the gerund always comes after the particle. I cannot say they kept calling on or Mike put reporting off. Here's some more information on intransitive phrasal verbs. Again, intransitive means that the verb does not take an object. So for example, if something will catch on, it becomes popular. To sign up means to register. To show up means to appear. In these cases, we do not need to have an object after the verb. The do not call list has caught on, has become popular everywhere. Margaret signed up last month. We don't have to say signed up for something. If an unfamiliar number shows up, don't answer. Again, these are intransitive verbs. They do not take an object. In this case, the verb and the particle are never separated. We use these when we make imperatives. An imperative is a command. Please come in. Don't call back. However, in writing, phrasal verbs are not seen as being formal. And so phrasal verbs are common in conversation. Her efforts paid off. But in formal writing, we might change that to a one-word verb. Her efforts were worthwhile. A couple of more notes here. Some phrasal verbs can be both transitive and intransitive. They can take an object or not. So for example, he called me back or he called back. Here we see an object of the verb. It's a pronoun, so we separate the verb and the particle. Here it's intransitive. We don't see an object with this verb. He called back, and we understand it's he called me back. But some phrasal verbs will change in meaning when you add an object or not. So in this case, we made up a story. That means we invented or we created a story. But if you don't put an object on and you say we made up, it means we ended a disagreement. We had an argument or a fight, and now it's over. The last note here. Sometimes we have a phrasal verb with a preposition. These are also known as three-word verbs. I recommend learning these as phrases. So to come up with, to drop out of, to hang up on. Here we see phrasal verbs with a preposition. In this case, the phrasal verb is usually inseparable, and the object will come after the preposition. To come up with something means to invent. She came up with, and here, a way to stop junk mail, a new idea. He dropped out of, we drop out of something. He dropped out of school and got a job. Why did you hang up on me? If you do a Google search for any of these key phrases, you will find a list, for example, of separable phrasal verbs, inseparable transitive phrasal verbs that must be separated, phrasal verb plus preposition combinations, and intransitive phrasal verbs. Again, if you search Google and type in list of these, you'll find many, many examples.